Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of CMIB of ICAI. Today's session is organized by CMIB to encourage and enhance links between the institute and chartered accountants in industries to develop various capacities. I would welcome you all on behalf of the chairman in absentia, CA Dheeraj Khandelwal, and vice chairman, CA Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Singhal. Uh, Now, going forward, today's seminar is on financial service sectors, opportunities for chartered accountants, and uh, now the CMIB is organizing such sessions to encourage uh, the skill set of chartered accountants, those who are into industry, to enhance their knowledge, expertise, skills, and assistance in individual career growth through development of extensive and intensive relationship with business organizations, agencies of government, departments, secretaries, ministries, central government, state governments. Today we have two learned speakers, CA Rohit Kumar Agarwala and CA Mangrish Gaitonde with us. So a short brief about CA Rohit. CA Rohit Kumar Agarwala has been appointed by Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Government of India as Director Finance, Chennai Petroleum Corporation Limited. Rohit Kumar Agarwala is a chartered accountant and holds a master degree in administration business, a gold medalist from Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar. He started his career in Indian Oil Corporation in 1997 and has a multi-unit experience working with refineries of IOCL in Guwahati, Paradeep, Vadodara, and Mathura. He has been there 10 years experience in corporate finance. He was team lead for multiple change management assignments in IOCL. Prior to joining CPCL, he was Chief General Manager Finance, Business Development Division, IOCL Corporate Office, New Delhi. He has worked across most of the finance verticals from accounting, costing, budgeting, profitability, MIS, pricing, project finance, risk management, fund management, overseas entities monitoring, litigation management to strategize for long-term growth. As the Director of Finance at CPCL with HR function reporting to him, a prominent refining company in South India, he excels not only in financial management, but also in developing a robust HR infrastructure. His role involves leading transformational initiatives that integrate cross-functional teams to diverse operational excellence and strategic growth. With a proven track record of delivering results in complex business environment, he thrives in challenging situations that demand a blend of financial acumen, leadership, and strategic thinking. He is passionate about learning new opportunities at the nexus of finance, technology, and people skills for sustainable development. He is dedicated to continuously expanding his knowledge and expertise and is committed to making a positive impact in the industry through research, innovation, and collaboration. Connecting with him can help explore potential strategies and opportunities for growth. I welcome Rohit ji on behalf of the team at CMIB. Now we'll like to hear him and his word of wisdom.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, ICAI. Distinguished speakers, esteemed colleagues, and respected attendees, it is with great honor that I address this gathering today. The financial service sector, a cornerstone of economic vitality, is undergoing an extraordinary transformation. As we navigate an era marked by digital innovation, evolving regulatory landscapes, and heightened global interconnectedness, our role as industry professional becomes ever more critical. Today's discussions are not merely about identifying opportunities, but about harnessing the potential that lies within each of us to lead this evolution with foresight, expertise, integrity. Together, we shall explore pathways that promise growth, resilience, and sustainable value creation for the industry and our members. To make it more relevant and practical, let me give the relevant brief. So I'm someone who joined the company, the first company, I was there, Indian Oil, through campus. So I'm like most of the present youngsters, who after doing CA go for a campus. And then I'm someone who is recruiting from campus since 2011. So every year, maybe close to about 60 to 80 people I recruit. So not only the profession, from a work point of view, from a profession, from a evolving job content, I am closely associated. And to make inroads, practical inroads into this discussion, let me start with few examples. And let's articulate how our profession is evolving, how the role of a chartered accountant is important in industry, and how this job content for a chartered accountant is ever evolving. So let me take the first example. So as happens in management, once we were articulating about hedging, you can understand the petroleum sector. Crude is an input. There are multiple products, petrol, diesel, all those kind of products. The industry is governed by high volatility. So we are deliberating, whether to do crude hedging, product hedging, crack hedging, what kind of which OTC market is suitable, what kind of lot size is impactful. So these are very detailed work that is happening. And then suddenly, when we saw that compared to the volatility, our hedging positions are much less, perhaps. We went to the root. We try to find out why, when the management is willing, to take more exposure in risk hedging, why we are not able, why we are not successful. And then in one of the conversations, it came out that the hedging team is a little worried. They are worried because intermittently, period to period, there could be losses, there could be gains. And they were a little worried that the business, the losses, which is part of the business, will deter them from doing right hedging. So we went for solution. We wanted to find out some solution, where the hedging gain and loss can be taken over the period of the position, tenure of the position. And suddenly we found a solution in hedge accounting. So what I'm referring now is there are CAs who are doing hedging. Hedge accounting is required. So what again we went to a CA. We started looking into a role profile of a CA who can help us in hedge accounting. I think most of you would know that hedge accounting is a little cumbersome in documentary parlance. It is cumbersome. It is detailed. And then when we're trying to do it, and it has to be done on a sustained basis because the volumes are large. It has to go on for a longer time. Then we started again deliberating on what instrument, which refinery, which parcel, So again our attention went to margin management. So again, a finance team who looks into margin management, who knows what lot size, what kind of crude, comes to which refinery, which is a benchmark crude, which crude can be hedged. So the point that I'm trying to drive is even into a commercial derivative transaction, when a team is engaged, they require a hedge accounting support, they require a margin management support. And when we deliberated afterwards, there are two aspects to it. First, who would solve, who would help, who would be that CA, young CA, who will help in the process. And then, the CFO on whom he would rely. So my experience tells in these kind of complex transactions which are interrelated, it is always you find solace with a chartered accountant. Only the education that we get as a chartered accountant is quite sufficient. Only we need to apply ourselves to the business transaction. A CA never says no. He applies himself, and that's the strength. And that is how we move from one point to another. We found end-to-end solution. Let me take another example, a very, very different kind of example. One of the young chartered accountant, because I was recruiting CAs, so I was also placing them. So I was making job profile for them and I was placing them. So one of the CAs we gave payroll. I think some of you will start, you have given payroll to a chartered accountant. But if I tell you later that because during that time we were implementing analytics in our payroll, with that experience, that CA candidate become the sought after guy, but the top notch Indian large technical companies, Infosys, TCS. And after that, within next 2 years, 3 years, his rise was phenomenal. What his colleagues could not do elsewhere in 10 years, he could do in 3 years. So again, what I'm hinting is, he was handling a technology which was in the cups, of revolution. He had the first handed. The subject was payroll, but because of that point, his career graph stood to the next level. And remaining in payroll also, when we say about payroll, we perhaps think about salary. But think about payroll and you think about investment planning, NPS implementation. There are multiple trusts from PRMS to gratuity to PF. These are self-managed trusts where the investment quantums are not less than an AUM. There are thousands of crores of money that is managed there. They take investment decisions, they take portfolio decisions. They look at they look at fixed income security, they look at equity market, they look at long-term growth. So what an investment banker would do, or a mutual fund analyst will do, or a portfolio player will do, he will do all these kind of things. Remaining on technology, another anecdote here. You would understand that ERP is there, omnipresent in backend of every transaction. But any ERP is not sufficient. You require a front-end tool. Once we are evaluating what front-end tool to take and how to implement, after selecting that software, when we went, who should lead this implementation team? A chartered accountant, a finance person, or ordinarily the way the IS guy comes. So now I'll tell you the kind of deliberation we had, that tells what a CA can do. So the deliberation is, if a IS implements this front-end system, this front-end system is to help CAs, so that analytics can be more usual, whatever you want, system can be configured. So discussion that happened is, again, for the IS person to implement, he would require functional expertise. So he will talk to you, understand from you, understand your requirement and concern, and then go and implement, and you will again come back to test it. And what is happening to technology? Technology has moved away from code writing to drag and drop and designing. So the discussion was around whether the IS would be better fit to lead this team, or if finance would be the better fit. And you'll be glad to know that it was decided overwhelmingly that let the finance lead it. Because finally, that product has to be used, and that product is not a technical product, it's a user product. So again, a small team of finance people who are handling diverse areas and had diverse skill set and was little advanced in technology, they were picked up and they did a marvelous job. And then after that, the company never looked back. Then this became a normal norm that all IS implementation is not to be led by an IS person. Depending on the functionality and depending on the importance, that IS will be led by a functional, can also be led by a functional person. We talk a lot about M&A, and we all must be reading. Energy transition is happening. The whole product basket will change. The carbon basket will change. So when this kind of transition happen, what a existing large player will do? Whom he will collaborate? What kind of industry will go? What kind of product he will go? Because this is evolution and it is transformation. It is changing everything. The players that you would like to collaborate are small players, new players, unique players. They have come up with some innovations and all. So what kind of tools and what kind of finance tools and techs will be useful? So all sides of M&A. From a very tiny player to a long-term management, to a acquisition, to floating a new company with multi-level structure. So designing the structure of the new company, a holding company with financial investor, break up at vertical level where expertise, expert people will come, and below them multiple SPVs, because today businesses doesn't run the way we used to run, earlier. So again, a very exhaustive M&A skill set required with multiple people, 20, 30, 50 finance, 50 people required. And again, you will be glad to know that most of them, that were picked up, were finance people, were chartered accountants who we felt are more versatile. They are ready to learn. They are ready to update their skill set, and they'll be more effective. Again, remaining on these things, I'll take another example on ESG. I was involved in one of the initial integrated reporting way back in 1920, 2021, where hardly 4 or 5 companies had reported IR. Again, look at IR, or in that sphere ESG. Now these are no more 6 capital. They are into climate finance. There are ranking elsewhere, green finance, and then the green finance doesn't happen with a banker. That starts with the reporting. So how do you report? How do you do carbon accounting? How do you bring in other aspects, which is finance linkages? How your compliances are better than others. Again, I would like to inform you here again, when we constructed the team, initially to find out what has to be done, and then when we wanted it to be implemented, again we found, without chartered accountants, perhaps the team is incomplete. You have to put in chartered accountants because they understand the linkages. At least on this example, all of you will agree that value proposition is key to chartered accountants. Beat your cost, margin management, and that's a cornerstone of strategy. And I feel that is a place where most of the CFOs are the best replacement of CEOs. So this is value proposition which is ingrained in our mind. That makes a chartered accountant very, very different and very, very unique compared to any other professional. But the only ask that is required is a chartered accountant, whatever business he is in, he has to link himself to businesses. He has to penetrate, go deeper into those finer aspects of businesses, and then bring it to the value proposition table. Link it there, label it there, and then present it to management. I think what a CFO can do, what a chartered accountant can do, is very difficult for others to replicate. And a CFO will be much better positioned than a technocrat in these kind of positions. So again, strategy field is a wide open field, which is more open to CFOs, I'll say, and chartered accountants that way rather than others. You may ask me, that I have narrated everything very easily, nothing else is required. Can a chartered accountant by default, achieve all this so swiftly? I'll say no, perhaps no. So if you ask me what chartered accountants requires in a training, which is very, very important for all of us, and today's training is continuous learning and continuous training, I feel the chartered accountant only requires a finishing skill, and the broad areas could be a technology, where we have to see, because technology will be evolving. So whatever is relevant for that aspect, we should have sufficient knowledge so that we understand, we know what to select, what it can do, and then how to use it. So that is how I'm calling it finishing skills. So finishing skills in technology, finishing skills in soft skills. As Gaurav was reading, I'm also in charge of HR. That doesn't happen. Normally, that doesn't happen. That a director of finance, we would have seen much of director of finance would be in charge of, would migrate to CEO position. But maybe there will be less cases where chartered accountant is in charge of HR also at a company level. But I'll tell you my experience as HR also. Again, I feel because I'm a chartered accountant, a lot of things became easy. But yes, I had taken, knowingly or unknowingly, some finishing skills and soft skills. So sensitivity, how to be empathetic, how to be sensitive, how to observe, those kind of skills, knowingly or unknowingly in my career, came to me, came across me. And that was very, very helpful when I see my role as the HR head. And I think strategy is another area where I think finishing skills are required, because strategy, there cannot be a strategy called finance strategy. I feel to formulate any strategy that is meaningful to a company, you need to understand, all different aspects of finance, be it HR, be it marketing, be it, your technology, R&D, and so people have to take some finishing skill, in strategy at different perspective. And this finishing skill need not be that one need to go for a training. Any chartered accountant, while working in various departments and sectors, and talking to technical people in those committee discussions and all, only has to keep his eyes and ears open. I feel then the kind of reflection that comes to a finance man, to a chartered accountant, is sufficient, because what he'll do is all his learning he will plot back to value proposition. He will see from a value proposition angle. He will see from a cost margin angle. He will see from a short term, long term. He will see from a total cost versus a variable cost versus a marginal cost kind of So the kind of tools that have been taught to us, and which is part of our system, are so robust, so unique. So that makes a lot of difference. I think with this briefing, I'll hand over to Gaurav, and then I think we'll listen to our other speaker, Mangrish, and then I'll be happy to take questions and any specific word.
Thank you for your insightful note, sir. Now I would thank Rohit ji for his deliberation, and I'll hand it over to Vineet to take it forward.
Good day, all. So I will be introducing our next speaker, CA Mangrish Gaitonde. So Mangrish is a partner with one of the Big Four, and he has started his professional career with ABN AMRO Bank, and then he worked with NatWest Bank, and he possesses the experience of more than 18 years, and he had worked mainly in domain of BFSI, global finance services, focusing on banking, insurance, wealth, and asset management. Apart from that, he had looked over the regulatory clients, regulatory reporting, product control, treasury, financial reporting, and FP&A. Apart from that, he take care of the finance transformation and optimization in different verticals across the segments of companies. So this is the brief about CA Mangrish Gaitonde ji. Now over to Mangrish ji to give his insight on the topic.
Thanks, Vineet ji, and I'll be thankful to Rohit. Good afternoon, everyone. So setting the context was very important, and I think he has laid down it very well. So I think from my perspective, when I say my journey started with ABN AMRO Bank, right, and that was way back in 2006. So since then, what I have observed over the course of last, say, 16 to 18 years, right? So, and that's where the banking trajectory has changed, right? So from the Indian context, I'll start first. We would have some, say, 300 plus banks in the country, and those comprising of, say, commercial banks, you have public sector banks, you have small finance banks, and you also have payment banks. So that's the gambit on the banking. We have some 66 plus insurance companies. We have some 800 plus AIFs, which is alternative investment funds. And of course, then we have the 1,000 plus non-banking finance companies. So I think this is the gamut of financial services, or as we call it, banking and financial services and insurance in India. Apart from that, of course, we have global giants in banking, in insurance, in wealth and asset management. So I think the overall gamut or the lay of land, as I would call it, is very huge from the financial services perspective. And it is changing drastically. The way the bank was operating, a typical financial institution was operating some 20 years back or 15 years back, definitely it's not the case. Right now, the things are moving substantially. And where they are moving and what are the areas? The areas particularly in terms of how the businesses are being conducted. What is the impact on the digital banking? How the payments infrastructure has changed. You yourself have experienced the extent of UPI, right? So you're all having your Google Pays, Phone Pays, Paytms, and how the payment infrastructure has undergone a change. Your net banking, your phone banking. So the extent to which the financial services have undergone a change. Amazon is considered to be larger than some of the banks in the world, right? So they also provide you the opportunity. They also provide you buy now, pay later. They provide you some good amount of financing options, right? So I think the overall structure of the financial services industry has changed drastically with the advent of new players, who are generally called as fintechs. You have all heard about Paytms, you have all heard about other PayPal and others in the world. So I think there is a fintech ecosystem, and then there are banks, and then we have non-banking financial companies. Over the course of next 10 to 15 years, we would also get to see ample amount of changes to this business and the operating models. Typically, a bank would have a investment banking function and it would have a commercial banking function. So investment banking would generally deal with all the areas of mergers and acquisitions, which is what Rohit was trying to allude to, right? So mergers and acquisitions, sales and trading, the areas where the investments would happen generally, the treasury, so bank makes a profit basically through lending. So it will borrow and it will lend. And when it is not lending, then it will do investment in treasuries, right? So through treasury, it will do investments and generate profit. So in essence, what I'm trying to say here is that as a banking institution evolves over the course of next 10 to 15 years, what would be their trajectory? So trajectory definitely would be not brick and mortar, but it would be more as an agile institution. It will have an embedded finance element. So what is embedded finance? So you have a bank account, you also would have an access to have mutual funds, to have access to have insurance, you will have access to other products within the same ecosystem of a banking portal. So I think that's the idea as you move forward. So in essence, what I'm trying to say here is that as a chartered accountant, as a professional, we need to be mindful of the fact that our conventional roles are expected to change. While we had a strong grounding into accounting, onto taxation, into financial management, into MIS or whatever you may call it, on the systems, we had a very strong grounding on costing, on the management accounting. So we had a very strong and a substance which has been created. Now is the time for you all guys to understand the entire ecosystem of financial services. In the insurance industry also, there is a drastic change which is expected to happen because the market is very huge and we're still not there in terms of covering the policyholders or from the perspective of the population at large being covered as a part of the insurance mechanism, right? So I think, again, the market is very huge. In terms of asset management, you would have heard alternative investment funds. So these are the funds generally in the form of private equity, venture capital funds. They would generally invest in the startups like Swiggy. They would have invested in Zomato before it went into listing. So those are the entities generally provide the finance where the conventional banking may not be able to do so. And that's a huge area in the financial services. They are one of the prominent force, I would say, in the financial services sector. And then, of course, we have non-banking finance companies. So the question always comes through how a non-banking financial company is different from a bank. So then in that case, one has to see the regulatory distinction. So non-banking financial services would cater to all those borrowers who are not being provided lending or loans through the banking channel. And that would generally happen because some of the borrowers could be from a different section, or there could be microfinance, right? So somebody who is connected to the farming or poultry or allied activities, or the medium or small enterprises, MSME as you all call it, right? So NBFCs definitely have their share to play. So it's a vast spectrum of financial services industry, and add to that we have American Express, HSBC, Citibank, and all other financial institutions, Prudential, MetLife. These are all the global players in financial services industry who are also operating in India, either individually or they are operating as a part of their global capability centers, or GCC as you may call it. So I think the spectrum is huge, and that makes the opportunity for a chartered accountant. As a budding chartered accountant, I think there are immense opportunities within the financial services sector. So understanding of financial services sector is all the more important. I've depicted some of the trends on the slide, and I just don't want to make it a monologue here, or I don't want to take you through slides, but the reason I wanted to put it on the slide is because to give you a perspective, we are trying to understand what are the key trends which will shape the financial services industry, not just in India, but also globally. One of
Sorry,
them, of
sir.
course,
Sir, can you please just uh, maximize your presentation because the participants aren't able to view it completely.
is it,
I guess we'll have to switch it to a presentation mode. Yeah.
I did that. I think I have done that already. But I'm not sure. Are you able to see it or you're not able to see
No,
it?
sir, the font is quite smaller in size.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's much better now.
Much better?
Yeah.
Slightly. Now is it better?
Yes, yes.
Okay, right. So thanks for that, Gaurav. So in terms of trends, of course, I would like to highlight that Gen AI, everybody has been working on their own accord, of course, through Chat GPT and trying to see what benefits one can get and whether we can generate presentations, resumes, or for that matter, any letters or anything for that matter, or of course, your own photographs as well by using some AI technologies, right? So adoption of Gen AI would be one of the critical elements in the financial services industry. And why do we say so? It's because the experience and the customer journeys would undergo a change, right? So from the customer perspective, we will be able to make it more personalized. If you would have seen in the last 10 years or so, it was more of commoditization. It was more of doing something as a part of the automated service just to make it available to the mass market. But coming with the adoption of Gen AI, there would be personalization. So you would get a very personalized inputs in terms of which products are suitable to you, from the loans, in terms of mutual funds, in terms of insurance, depending upon your profile, depending upon your habits. And how this will happen is through the data, which is available either through social media or either through the database, which is maintained by the financial institutions. Of course, there are issues on privacy, there are issues on other aspects. One will definitely have to deal with that aspect. But the point I want to make here is the technology in the form of artificial intelligence and in particularly Gen AI definitely would be something which will impact the ways in which the financial institutions will function, and whether those financial institutions will function in the existing form or whether they will undergo a change in terms of their entire business operating model will have to be seen. Of course, that does not mean there are no opportunities. There are immense opportunities, as I would say, in the form of either you acquiring the knowledge on these technologies. Because as a chartered accountant, and this is what my personal experience has been when I started, it was working in Excels. But as we have evolved, we have to either use Microsoft Power BI, we have to use SAP, we have to use Oracle, we have to use other ERPs. We are also expected to use certain coding languages to understand them. And why that is required is because as we move forward, it will be very important for a professional not just to have a knowledge of the domain, which is accounting and finance, but also important would be the understanding of the business and a bit of technology, because technology will be very ingrained and very critical, or rather it's by design, would be part of our job. So I think from the Gen AI perspective, it becomes all the more important for individuals like us to understand what is prompt engineering. Prompt engineering, how do I give a prompt to a chatbot? How do I give a prompt to in a Chat GPT or any other large language model which is used by a financial institution or any entity for that matter? So I think understanding that, getting that knowledge becomes very important. With the extent of automation, of course, there has been a risk of cyber security. Cyber security is because there is a data, and data is the new oil. Data has been very important element, and Rohitji was highlighting to the same fact. Somebody working in payroll, doing the analytics and doing wonders definitely he has got himself equipped, he got scaled up, and so has organization benefited out of it. So understand if there is a data around this and there are transactions happening, there are online transactions happening, then of course the cyber security becomes a very important element. Every institution needs to safeguard. And other regulations globally, if you see, and you all read through the media, electronic media, through print media, through your social networks, or through Instagram or from other sources, you would have also seen, heard that there are different regulations which have come through, like global data protection regulations, GDPR regulations globally. In Europe, in United States, there are regulations on data protection. So is in India as well. So cyber threat, the regulations to it have become a very important element. So what's the role of the chartered accountant here? So chartered accountant, of course, with a bent of mind, we have always been professional skepticism as has always been our cornerstone as a profession. We have been able to appreciate, understand the risk which emanates to the processes and these business processes which will be getting impacted because of the cyber risk. That's where the role of the chartered accountant will come. Somebody who understands the finance, somebody who understands the business, and he can work back with the professional or the cyber expert to institute the processes, the systems, and the controls. So I think that's a very important element. Third aspect I will just briefly touch upon on the sustainability, right? So in terms of Rohit has already involved on sustainability. Sustainability is nothing but how do we deal in every areas, and that also means the lending which is done by the banks, whether it is being funding the projects which will. So for example, I'll give an example of internal combustion engine, right? So our own cars which we drive, right? The petrol cars or the diesel cars. So whether the funding, if the bank were to say that I will only do a funding to ESG compliant businesses, whether the funding for internal combustion business, which runs on the fossil fuels, right, which works on the petrochemicals, will be considered ESG compliant because there is a risk around it. So I think sustainable finance would be an area which will emerge substantially. So whether the funding will happen to EVs, electric vehicles, or the funding will happen to all the businesses needs to also take care of not just this element, but also in terms of diversity, what is their male-female ratio, what is their ratio in terms of other aspects, how are they good from the management perspective, because that's where the ESG is all about, and that's where the sustainable finance will come into play, or in terms of green finance. So you can have different methodologies used to it. The point I want to make here is, as a professional, one has to be well versed with this concept. Well, one has to be read through in terms of what is the integrated reporting, which Rohitji was highlighting. What is the strategy on the ESG, whether on environmental governance, and what is the sustainability element around it in each of the business. And chartered accountants are well equipped on these areas to understand and appreciate and to help on the reporting of these aspects, and also to help on the processes and the controls element on this entire ESG elements. So I think sustainable finance is something which will definitely happen. In the aftermath of 2008 financial crisis, there has been a substantial focus on regulatory changes, and none other than the banks were absolutely in the forefront of it, whether it is in United States through Federal Reserve or Securities Exchange Commission, or whether it's through the Bank of England or Prudential Regulatory Authority of UK, or whether it is through Monetary Authority of Singapore, or whether it is through our own Reserve Bank of India. So there has been substantially requirements on the regulatory compliances. The reportings have undergone a change. There are a host of reportings which have come into play in terms of capital adequacy, in terms of liquidity reporting, in terms of risk reporting, in terms of fraud reporting. So I think there are different elements. So till date, the compliance with respect to financial services for a bank or an NBFC or for an insurance company has increased manifold. And what does that mean for us as a professional? We are well suited because we have been trained into reportings. We have been trained into how the disclosures are to be managed in terms of financial services or financial systems. We can apply the same knowledge, understand, gather the knowledge on business, and equip ourselves on various regulatory developments, whether it is Dodd-Frank Act, whether it is the liquidity reporting of UK, whether it is the common adequacy reporting, CORAP or FINREP. So I think these are all the regulations which generally are being faced, or rather are to be complied by the banks. So I think it's a very important element. The next area in terms of, so Vinit, just help me if the slides are not moving. Yeah, I think while I've changed the slide, please let me know if the slide has changed.
You may just present that.
Let me just see. The slide has changed, right?
Yeah, now it's changed.
Okay, very good. So I think so essentially what I was trying to say is that over the course of years, these are the changes which will definitely happen. And then the most important other change is, of course, apart from the payments, which I've already highlighted, the wallets I have highlighted, is the cloud technology, right? Our conventional ERPs or the conventional the programs or for example, the core banking systems were on your own on-premises servers or the data centers. Now it will be on the cloud in case of certain organizations, right? So what does that mean for a chartered accountant? So as again, Rohitji was highlighted to the fact that if there is a system change, who is well suited, whether the administrator or whether the finance personnel, who is well suited? So if there is a change to the finance system, right, whether there is a change to the reporting system, I think the chartered accountants or the finance professionals are well suited because they understand as to ultimately the business events, how they are to be reported as a part of the financial reporting or regulatory reporting. So I think every other element, and from my personal experience also, I have been involved with certain ledger migrations, finance transformations as a professional over the course of last 16 years or so, and for some of the leading banks as well. So the idea here is that to equip yourself in terms of business knowledge, to equip yourself in terms of the systems knowledge. And what is the role? The role is of a business analyst. As a chartered accountant, you will act as a business analyst. You will be the bridge between the subject matter experts who are the process owners and the technology professionals. So technology professionals are not expected to understand the business. They are not expected to understand the finance. And the business universe doesn't understand technology. So you are the business analyst between the business user and technology. You are the interface. You help them create the business requirements document. You help them to test the outcomes, whether they are in line and the expectations with respect to either financial reporting or reg reporting. So I think there are immense opportunities in terms of trends. Future, I'll briefly touch upon how the future will pan out. Now, as a future, definitely the differentiator, right? As a financial services, what would be the differentiator? As I said, an institution will not be able to continue to just offer a bank loan. It will not be able to just offer the cash management services or not just the ATM services or mobile banking. It has to be much more than that. How they would do it? They would have to do collaborations. They would have to do certain mergers with other operators or other players in the industry. So certain fintechs, banks, insurance companies, combination of those, because the differentiator, of course, is the customer, and customer loyalty cannot be guaranteed as we speak, right, at this point in time, because what happened some 20-25 years back, the customer of a bank will always continue to be a part of the bank, and the relationship continued over the years. But now what is happening is that or just not because of the change in the rate of interest, but because of the experience which the customer gets, there could be a change from or a switch from one operator or one entity to another. Classic example, right? So somebody were to tell you that the car insurance for which you're paying the insurance, right? You pay by miles, right? One insurance company says that you pay me by the IDV value or the value of the vehicle, and the other insurance company tells you that you pay me by miles. So the time and the duration for which you will run the kilometers, accordingly you pay me. Of course, you will switch to the other company, right? There could be other health insurance company. They might tell you that you paid me the premium basis your fitness, which we will monitor through the gadgets, the number of steps you take. Depending upon that, we will change your premiums, right? So I think the innovation, the differentiator, the subscription-based offerings, which is what I was trying to put forward, will come through foray, and that would change. What does that mean? Subscription-based offerings. That means there is a complexity in accounting. That means there is a complexity to the processes and how that will pan out. We have our India's, our Indian accounting standards, we have IFRS, we have regulatory reporting. How does it pan out if the business model itself will undergo a change in terms of delivering the services? Then how does it pan out in terms of reporting? How does it pan out in terms of controls and processes? And these are all the areas as a chartered accountant, which we are most suited, we are better suited than anyone else, right? So I think that is what I'm trying to bring out. So that's the future in terms of industry, whether it is insurance, whether it is banks, whether it is NBFCs, or whether it is asset management companies. Again, from the wealth and asset management company, as I was telling you, they are competing with banks. If they are able to generate business, right? The only reason why they are able to generate a business, one, because the regulatory restrictions are more on banks, as we said, right? So there are regulatory restrictions, there are regulatory reportings, there are regulatory monitoring, which is much stronger in case of a banks, which is slightly lighter in case of wealth and asset management companies. And that's where the alternative investment funds have flourished. And those are trying to address the need for a market, or the borrowing needs of the market, the investment needs of the market. So what's the role of a chartered accountant in case of a wealth and asset management? There are different roles a chartered accountant can have. One, as they themselves being part of the investment mandates, how the investment mandates are structured. So as a professional, you can be part of it, you can do the analysis, you can help do that analysis, where the investments have to be done, what are those factors, whether you are betas, whether you are CAPMs, whether you are hurdle rates, how do you generate the returns, how do you generate the alpha for the fund. So that's all the analysis where chartered accountants, of course, they will have to get some additional knowledge in terms of security analysis or the fund analysis, but are equipped, they're able to do so. Then there are areas in terms of fund accounting and reporting, or fund management, right? So fund accounting and reporting and fund management, fund financials will have to be prepared. And that's where the role of the chartered accountant comes very forth, to understand how the net asset value is derived. Now, there are different aspects to it. One is the regulated funds, which are in the form of mutual funds, which everybody knows. There are regulations in form of SEBI regulations. There are other regulations. So for a mutual fund, how the accounting will happen, how the reporting will happen. There are fact sheets which are being prepared. The fact sheets gives into an area of where the fund is investing, what is the return they have generated, what has been the exit charge, what has been the entry load, all the aspects. So these entire gamut of fund administration, fund management, fund reporting has to be done by a chartered accountant, because they are well equipped in terms of the nuances of finance. Of course, that does not mean you just go straight away do it. You will have to acquire certain skill sets which are complementary to your existing skill set, and that is what is the need of an hour. So from the wealth and asset management perspective. In terms of ESG and transformation, I've already highlighted to the fact that as we move forward, as the governments take the target and the organization takes target of net zero carbon emissions, moving the economy for the sustainable sources, the role of the chartered accountant or the professionals who understand the ESG elements would be substantially high. And that's where you will have to put in the efforts to gain that knowledge, the understanding which is required while the policies are being framed, they are being drafted, and how the reporting will happen. And that is a very important element. The increasing technology convergence, right? So technology convergence. Why are we seeing convergence in technology? Because the entire decisions on the customer life cycle, how the customer is generating the business revenue, is undergoing a change, and technology becomes a very integral part of it. And so is for finance, so is for reporting. The technology becomes an integral part of it. Your entire data analysis, your entire financial planning and analysis, FP&A as a function, which helps the senior management or a C-suite to decide the course of action, how they want to steer the organization. That's where the technology elements will also come into play. How the data is sliced, diced, analyzed, and that is where the FP&A as a function will have a very important role to play. And what is there for a chartered accountant? Considering the knowledge of business, considering the knowledge of your industry domain, whether it is banking, whether it is insurance, whether it is BAM, wealth and asset management, or NBFC, you are better suited on those areas. Of course, you'll have to gain certain skills, which I will cover in the subsequent slide, but that's an area which will be very important. So you have to be techno savvy. You will have to have a technical bent of mind. You must have the agility to understand the demands of the business, because nothing will be a rule driven approach. Of course, you will be expected to design the rules, certainly, but you will be expected to understand the business requirements. So the core is business, and then on the top of it is the layer of finance and regulatory reporting. That's where the complete finance or a chartered accountant's role would be. So Rohitji was highlighting to the fact that the solution has to be end-to-end. And that's where I would say it has to be holistic. And the holistic solution will only come into play if you understand how the business operates, how the business is generating the revenue, the profit, and the sustainability of that, and how that translates into your financial results and the regulatory reportings. Only then you will be able to put a value to it. Otherwise, it will not sustain, right? Employee propositions, employees' mindsets will have to be very different at this point in time. We have professional skepticism. As I said, we need to be emotionally intelligent. We need to have the element of curiosity, the critical thinking, which will be very important. And why this will be important is because of the artificial intelligence, because of the Gen AIs. You would have come across deep fakes, right? Now, deep fakes are coming in photos. At the same time, deep fakes are also there in the form of data or impersonation of transactions. If the transactions get impersonated, they come to you as a part of the valid transactions. You should have the ability, you should be able to comprehend the difference between the valid business movement and these transactions which are generated through some malicious intentions or from some code or an error which has come through it. So that will only come through if you have the curiosity, if you have the critical mindset and a professional skepticism, which will be very important, because at the end of it, at this point in time, you are working alongside the machine. So it's very important that you are able to work as a collaborative agents together to generate value to the business. So employee proposition is very important. Regulation, of course, as I said, there would be a thrust of importance on the regulation as we move forward, right? So there was a blockchain. So there were digital currencies which are coming into force. Even we have a digital currency in India, Indian rupee. I'm not sure if you would have highlighted it. You can definitely download it from any of the banks. And if you have digital rupee in your wallets, and there is a blockchain, there are cryptocurrencies. And if this infrastructure were to interact with the banking infrastructure or the payments infrastructure, to understand the implication it creates in terms of the regulation and the regulations which will have to then churn out the compliance and the reports and the periodicity of those reports. So all this adds to the opportunities for us as the professionals to understand that entire environment and how we can design, how we can work back with the regulators and with the entities to structure those reports and streamline the data set which is required, because at the end of it, data will be required and the data resides in the organization, right? So how those data sets will have to be created, how the structuring of that report is to be done, and the filing of that report is to be done. So regulatory supervision will be increased because the trust element has to be enhanced as we move forward, right? That means we would need certain set of skills. What are those skills at this point in time? The skills, definitely, as I said, your understanding of the international business is very critical. This has become all the more important over the course of last 5 to 10 years because of the tremendous change in the business models. If I were to say Amazon is operating more like a bank rather than a marketplace, that would be something which is a cause, not of a concern, but to understand how that is to be integrated in our understanding. What is changing? There are different regulatory technologies, right? To understand, the RegTech has become a word. So if you are in financial services, you will come across a word called RegTech, so which says that regulatory technologies. So companies like Oracle, companies like Axiom, companies like Cartesius Magnitude, companies like Thomson Reuters. These are all the companies, those who have created regulatory technologies to monitor, to control, and to disseminate the information and the reportings which are required. So the knowledge of those would be very important. So you have to identify the area where you want to work, whether you want to engage your energies in regulatory reportings, regulatory monitoring, whether you want to work as a part of the compliance and regulatory reporting race, then you need to understand the gamut of reg reporting. There are areas on project management certifications would be required because the project management as we speak has undergone a change. What we were told or initially we always followed the waterfall mechanism, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. So in the chronological order, we were executing the projects. But right now, the project management also has undergone a change. So there is something called agile implementation methodology. So we just create a part of it in the form of minimum viable product. We test it, and then we make the course correction and move forward. So if there is an agile implementation for the large projects, then as a chartered accountants, since we said that we are better suited for these projects, we need to be well versed with the required project management methodologies, whether it is Scrum, whether it is the project management certification or other methodologies. So that makes me to acquire those skills if I were to act as a business analyst or I were to act as a program manager or a project manager for large scale implementation projects. So that's a very important element. Gen AI as an element, right? As a Gen AI, while we need to be mindful of the technology, but also understand what is the genesis of the technology. Whether the knowledge of Python as a coding language or SQL as a coding language, whether as a professional I need to be well versed with that, maybe yes, because as I said in the beginning, the roles have undergone a change. Now it is not working alongside the technology, but the technology itself is subsumed as a part of your work or your design. So you will have to understand whether you are expected to know certain coding languages, understand and expected to know whether the prompt engineering, how do we interact with the model, because the model learns from your feedback and then it generates its own output. That's the beauty of Gen AI, which is not similar to what we experienced in past. In past, we had the automations. So whatever was told, it was generating the output. But we provide a third input, the machine was not able to generate the output because machine was never fed into with that scenario. But coming generative AI, the model learns and from the training data. And if the model learns, then we are the users and we are going to provide the feedback. So we need to understand the nuances of that technology to a certain extent. I am not saying that we be technocrats, we be the engineers, but we have the mindset of the engineer, we have the mindset of the technocrat to understand certain elements of the language so that we are able to better appreciate the technology and use it as a part of our work. So I think that's a very important element. Undergo trainings on business analytics and transformation. If you want to part of the SAP implementation, you want to part of the Oracle implementation, you want to part of the treasury system implementation, whether it is a bank or whether it's an NBFC or insurance company, you need to understand what is a business analyst expected to do, how a business requirement document needs to be framed, how do you do interviewing with the business users or the process owners, how do you understand the design thinking principles, right? There is a different approach of gathering this information and then giving it to the people who are going to do the coding, those who are going to put it in the form, right? Those are the IT professionals. So whether you're capturing the user stories, so user stories are nothing but the requirement of the user, how that is to be captured. So I think those skills become all the more important, very important as we move forward if you are planning to be part of some of the transformation initiatives. Of course, then there are areas on risk management. As I said, as a chartered accountant, if you are interested as a part of the risk management function, you need to understand the attributes of the risk. In a bank, there is an operational risk, there is a credit risk, and then there are other elements of liquidity risk, then there are financial risk. So there are different elements of risk. So how those risks are captured, monitored, and reported. So that becomes a very important element. So you may have to undergo a qualification which is in addition to a chartered accountant, whether it is financial risk management professional, understand the Basel framework. Basel is the capital adequacy accord, which is required for the banks to maintain a capital adequacy. In a simple sense, if I were to say, if you are lending 100 rupees and if you want expected to follow a Basel record, then maybe a 10 rupees has to keep as a Basel reserves, right? So, but then it is not that simple. So there is a framework. So then there are various aspects on different types of lendings would attract different types of weights. So if you are really keen to understand this aspect, you need to equip yourself with the frameworks, whether through financial risk management or through other certifications, but you need to have it, because then only you'll be able to understand, appreciate, and put a value when you're working in that function. ESG certifications are very important and a mandatory aspect. Why I would call it mandatory? Because if you were to foray into these areas, it will be extremely important for you to understand this and get a context around this, whether it is the Masters in Sustainability or ESG certifications. These are the areas. Institute has some of it. You can touch base with the point of contact at the institute, or from that perspective, or from the other areas as well, to get yourself equipped on this. And then there are areas on product control, treasury systems. As I said, product control is nothing but a function of the bank which will dealing with equities, derivatives, bonds, debentures, currencies, commodities, and that's how it generates the revenue for the bank, right? So understanding of the SAP Treasury, Murex, or any other systems which are required from the treasury perspective would be a very important area. And lastly, not but the least, the analytics becomes a very important aspect from FP&A perspective. So either it is Excel, Microsoft Power BI, Tableau, ClickSense, these are all data visualization tools which one has to be very well versed with if one is expecting to work in an FP&A function or a decision support function of a financial services industry. I think I've spoken a lot at this point in time. I know I will take a pause here, and if at all there are any questions, maybe Vineet, you can put across to myself and Rohit both alike. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for giving us such a good insight around all the development happening on day-to-day basis and what is the robust environment doing. So we have some questions from our perspective and from the listeners' perspective. So let me start with one of the questions that once you are talking of in the last you are talking of the financial planning and analysis. So what are the tools available these days to do the financial planning and analysis in a much better way or maybe smoother way for organizations?
Right. So I think I'll take a stab at this question, and of course, Rohitji, you do add from your perspective. So the last line which I was depicting here, right? So
Yeah.
Excel is the spreadsheet generally was used in the organization, or rather it is used at this point in as we speak. Many organizations used Excel, right? And they use macros, then they use pivots, and then they create those scenarios and do the planning analysis, budgeting exercise. Everywhere it is spreadsheet. Very, I mean, say global banks as well are currently using Excel. But as we move forward, of course, there is a transition which is happening. And as we move forward, the visualization has taken a foray into it. Microsoft Power BI is the one can definitely look at. And the reason one can look at is because of the cost. Microsoft Power BI comes as a part of the Microsoft policy or the Office family. And the subscription is also maybe 600 rupees per year or so, maybe less than that. So it's one of the widely available, and the organizations which are trying to use data visualization in their functioning use Microsoft Power BI. Then there are others like Tableau, ClickSense, which are on the higher end of the things. Those are some certain organizations also use them, but then there are subscriptions and licenses fees one has to take into consideration. But point I want to make here is, if one were to start on the visualization, Microsoft Power BI or for that matter, is a good way to start and analyze the financials.
Okay. And
Mangrish, I think you are pretty right on this. The only thing I like to articulate this is, see, till some time ago, the larger organization or the medium organization used to develop, dashboards. But as Mangrish told, that system is going to change. There'll be no hard coding. There'll be click and drop kind of utilities that will come, that will be handy, which will allow you to do all those visualization and link your backend data. But something more apt to chartered accountants, I'll tell, the way calculators and other machines are secondary and your mental calculation is primary when you are in dire strait. Simply in the same way, when you are trying something new, you have to have your simple offhand tools with you. Yes, with time, this dashboards and other will get simplified with some of the tools that Mangrish said. But I think, yes, offhand you have to have some tool where something unique strikes you. Even Excel, I find is all weather friend in that way, and which has improvised a lot. Yes, over to you.
Thanks, Rohit.
So I'm coming with what next question. So for our, our colleagues, basically new chartered accountants which are coming into industry or maybe going to consultancy. So what if somebody has the nick for the finance area or maybe business, basically financial sector? So what he or she should do in his career to excel in that particular area?
I'll take it, and Mangrish can add. I felt, for consultancy, and suppose someone is not, for consultancy, I feel, in addition to the finance domain, a chartered bread and butter domain, I think the business insight or the process insight is very, very important. So one can start in his own domain, taxation, accounting, valuation, whatever. And then whatever role he's doing, he has to go a little deeper into the business processes and see what is that USP, what is that what is that change, or what is that additional input, or what is that additional output that is making that, that is making the business different. Once he understands it, I think there is no better consultant than a chartered accountant. And I think then he can, he can think about migrating into consultancy because he has deeper knowledge into that system. Mangrish, you would like to add?
One thing I would echo the views which you have expressed. So as a budding professional, most important element is to work in the area where your existing area, for example, taxation or financial reporting, then try to branch out and see, because the critical element here is that whichever area we want to branch out, as I was speaking to you earlier as well, you would need to have the expertise getting developed. So it is FP&A, then you need to have visualization experience. If it is transformation, then you need to have the areas on project management and other technologies which have come through. Then there are regulatory reporting. So then there are other areas where you'll have to get yourself equipped with. And if you want to do into financial planning for as a part of the consulting also, they need to understand the securities market and the regulations around securities market. So I think first you worked in the area where you're working at this point in time, and then try to branch out, which will increase your overall gamut.
I have one more question for you, both of you basically. So these days, since we are working in the cyberspace and everybody is struggling for the data security and cyber threats are there, people are getting, number of calls or maybe emails that you are being, some parcel is there. So how as a chartered accountant or as a professional, we can guide our client or in our organization to deal with these type of threats, and how to are the mitigating things we can do to mitigate that risk?
Rohit, you have to go first, and then maybe I will add.
Yeah. So as Mangrish also covered, today we wish or we do not wish, we are digital, directly, indirectly, and more so directly. So data security, cyber threats are pretty important. So for a large manufacturing company, I said OT, the operational data and the general data, so they keep a segregation, they keep a firewall, and there are lots of software and a lot of system that is available, so that the access, outside access is only, he's able to access only the areas allowed. He's not able to access areas not allowed. And then I feel very important, very simple approach to this is alertness among employees, people who are dealing with this. Because at times, if you are alert, you will get that sense that something fishy is happening, and a lot of things can be saved, a lot of money, a lot of overrun cost, interruptions can be stopped. So alertness is prominent, but yes, today we cannot ignore data security and those issues, even for a professional like a chartered accountant, because finally, we are talking about the knowledge domain. So that is your USP. So I think that's important. Yes, Mangesh.
I think thanks, Rohit. So I think I was alluding to the fact in terms of critical thinking, right? The critical thinking becomes very important in this area, and understanding of the technology becomes all the more important. And that's where the deep fakes and the other element was coming for you. If you understand the technology, the identification becomes much easier. In terms of the organizational data, right? In terms of organizational data as well, there are certain access control elements, access control lists, or access control areas. You are only required to or allowed to venture into only those areas and access the information. For example, in case of a bank, the customer data is a very holy grail. The customer data cannot move outside the jurisdiction. As per the RBI regulations also, the customer data cannot move outside the India. So if the customer data has to be entrusted in any shape or form, there are certain protocols one has to follow. And then you cannot use it even for your internal experiments or internal testing purpose unless you have required level of approvals in place. So I think most important element what Rohit was highlighting, the alertness coupled with the critical thinking and the knowledge of the technology would be very important as we venture into future.
So Gaurav, do you have any questions from our audience?
I have a question to both of them. What is the opportunity for a chartered accountant in financial service sector, particularly experienced people?
Okay. So I think the opportunity for in finance service sector, I think we have deliberated in length. So for the last 1 hour 15 minutes, we have been telling multiple opportunities that exist. Now on the second part, where we are saying specifically to experienced person. So I'll start with like this. In today's world, with respect to CA, with respect to any JD, there is nothing called black and white. So there is no black, there is no white. It is all shades of gray. So the way job description is evolving, your existing knowledge, your existing domain is very important. And there are no silos in JDs. There is no silo in job description. So, I think there is a great potential for experienced people to move into financial service sector, because if you take all the examples that I took or Mangris took, you call it M&A, you call it ESG, you call it hedging strategies or digital, you cannot have one skill set cannot make end-to-end solution. You cannot solve a problem, or you cannot own a solution if you have one skill set. So it has to be a mix of both. So all your relevant experiences are handy today, that you have to combine with the new roles, some finishing skills, and that is how I think, rather I will say, today the importance of experienced people are much more, or they are more prized today than ever before, because today people are not looking into that you will discharge one part of a role. No, people are looking towards you to give a solution, to take end-to-end decisions. So I think their experience along with the relevant finishing skill for the new role, is very, very apt, and and experienced people will be very relevant and very in demand. Mangrish?
Yeah, I think so. What Rohit, I was just trying to understand as to from your question perspective. So experience, as Rohit rightly mentioned, right? We don't need experience at this point in time. And let me put it this way. And the reason I'm saying so is because in certain cases we need a clean slate approach. And reason I'm saying so is because the only elements which will be important for you is to have the curiosity, the critical thinking, and the ability to collaborate. These are the three elements which are very important. And if you are able to understand the domain, the business, I believe you can either start in asset management, you can do in a captive of one of the bank insurance company, you can very well work with a non-banking finance company. But the ability, as again I will highlight to this fact that the curiosity, the open mind, and the collaboration element is a non-negotiable element which you will have to have it. Experience, he would say, if there is an experience, I would really urge you only to take some elements of it, and not because we cannot have jobs which are now in a very rule-based manner. They are all fluid, and that entails that there's some fluid intelligence. I know, excuse me for using certain terms, but that is very important. You will have to take the knowledge and transfer it in some other form. And I am confident that as a professional, you will be able to work in any organization, provided these three elements which I highlighted, you are able to deliver on that.
So now, since we're talking about opportunities for members in industries, so are there any specific, since you both have been on the hiring side, you've been employing chartered accountants for quite some time. So what are the additional skill set apart from the technical knowledge that you look up to, and how chartered accountants can help, get a hands-on experience about that? Or are there any courses or any suggestions that you can put forward?
My views on this. See, if you look at freshers, across discipline, finance, non-finance, engineers, I felt no one is more competent for hiring than a chartered accountant. Because we call chartered accountant as fresh, but chartered accountant comes with 1 year of industrial experience, 3 years of practical training, hands-on training. So actually, chartered accountant is never a fresh. Even the pass out, fresh pass out chartered accountant is also experience, has skill set, practical skill set of at least 3 years, and that too versatile, not one skill set, multiple skill set. I felt at a junior middle level chartered accountant itself, chartered accountant skill set itself is good. But as I have been saying, Mangrish have been saying, the skill set, the finishing skill set will always evolve. There is no permanent skill set that has to be done. Looking into what role you are targeting, looking into what profile, looking into what journey you want to travel. Maybe you have to target what is your present requirement, what is the finishing skill, which will supplement to your existing skill, and then what is the next path you will choose. So I think, and today's that is not difficult. Earlier, getting a skill set was difficult. You have to find out the institute, you have to enroll, you have to do it. Now only you have to have a wish, and you have to allocate some time. So at your desk, at your home, at your leisure, there are tools, tackles, processes available where you can harness that skill, and then you can build. You can travel in the journey that you want to travel. So I think the skill set wise, no great things are required. The education that a chartered accountant gets is ample, but yes, because there'll be finishing skills required, that one should target based on his own journey, his own path, and the present interest. Manglish?
Thanks.
Okay, just one more question from the audience. That how a newly qualified get the opportunity to work in investment fund?
Okay. I'll answer the first part of it, and then we go to the investment fund of it. So the critical elements, at least what I look at as a candidate, right? So one is the presentation skills. Presentation, when I say how he or she is able to articulate his or her thoughts, which is very important. So as a professional, you need to understand that element, understand the aspect of PowerPoint presentations, the Word, the Excel, the emotional intelligence, EI becomes extremely important as you work in any organization. EI is very critical. I would give an equal weightage to it alongside your technical competence. Because if you are not emotionally intelligent, you are not able to steer within the organization, and you will not be able to contribute to the overall growth agenda of yours as well as of the organization. So emotional intelligence is extremely important. Presentation skill in terms of clarity of thought, the way in manner in which you'll put forth as a part of Word document or PowerPoint presentation or Excel, all through your communication is very important. I think these are non-negotiables if you were to get into any of the organizations, or even if you want to start on your own as a part of the startup or as a professional organization. That is first. The second element in terms of how do I start my career as a part of the investment fund. So I think there are n number of investment funds, but having said that, before you join them, I would urge you to understand how the fund operates. So some basic level of knowledge referring to certain publications, certain websites, getting or YouTube's, which is what is very familiar. Even for that matter, you can go to YouTube's or Instagram Reels if that helps, right? Try to get good amount of knowledge into how the fund is structured, what is the investment manager, role of a limited partner, role of a general partner. Try to get that thing, and I'm sure there are various asset management companies. There are companies like Global, there are companies like Apollo Capital, there are companies like Citco. I'm naming some of our clients, I'm naming some of the companies as well, just for the benefit of you, that these are some of the large players, or Morgan Stanley's of the world, or JP Morgan's of the world. They do hire freshers, but when you go there, as I said, one is the presentation aspect, and two, the basic knowledge on the fund accounting, and third, the knowledge on IFRS, which is IFRS 9, which is the financial instrument standard, will be very important for you to understand if it is an Europe-based fund, and to certain extent, if you can get some knowledge on US GAAP in terms of ASC 944 or other accounting standards in terms of investment accounting, I think you'll be able to land up that job. If you are able to do this, I'm 100% sure, you're sitting here, I can tell you, at least you will go to the second level of your interview if you are able to demonstrate this level of confidence.
So I think we are done with the questions from the audience. So Gaurav, do you have any questions with you?
Yeah, so how can members stay updated with the latest industry trends and developments?
Yeah, Rohitji, you want to go first?
Yeah. Again, my view here would be, today is not the world where information deficit exists. Rather, over information is an issue to be managed. And my issue would be, you have to select again your focus where you want to go, and then identify two to three, digital or some other sources, which is little reputed. I think otherwise in today's world, getting updated is not a big challenge. On a lighter side, someone was telling me, and I find it is so true and so serious. He said, today your mobile itself is a university. See, while doing anything, if you need something, you just put that in Google, and you'll find 5 options or 10 options or 20 options, and immediately will glance which is a resource which you can rely on. So the idea today is, I think, on updates, not only periodical updates help from a nice source, as in when the doubt comes in your mind, use your friend, your mobile, adequately, and I think there'll be no dearth of at least information or updation. Mangrish?
Yeah, thanks, Rohitji. So while I was also referring to in my previous conversation, right, whether you refer to Instagram or whether you refer to YouTube, most important element here is the critical thinking. Because whatever information is disseminated through WhatsApp University or from any other channels, right, you have to verify in terms of the authenticity. And that authenticity gets verified if you refer to some reputed publications or some of the publications like Big Four. I'm not saying refer for everywhere. You refer to Big Four, Big Seven, or any organizations who are, for example, if you are doing fund accounting and reporting, then maybe you refer to SS&C, GlobeUp, or you refer into any other publications from the investment manager's perspective. If you are doing an insurance, then maybe you refer from the IRDA websites, or you take in insurance update from the global US regulators, or for example, UK regulators, or insurance magazines, or our own chartered accountant magazine for that matter. Similarly, for banking, you can refer to various websites, certain publications like Business Standards, Economist, Harvard Business Review. These are some of the very good publications, and they churn out McKinsey's of the world. They also have very good publications on these topics. So I think the different elements one can look at it. But as I said, the authenticity of the information has to be verified. The source is very important. And whatever knowledge you gather, please check. So it has to be evidence-based wisdom, and it cannot be just a wisdom because it is freely available.
Just to add, Mangrish, one more thing, and colleagues, I found is, in today's world, the government institution and other institutions, large institutions, they come out, like a BSc, NSC, public institutions and government, they come out with periodical updates. I find if someone wants to have a permanent, updation, periodically checking with their latest updates helps. Not only update about the recent past, they also create roadmaps for future. So our mind is attuned to what may come, what is likely to come, and that helps between the right information, that helps also helps to decimate right information versus wrong information. So again, while you are doing whatever Mangrish and I have told, I think periodically checking with institutions, government or otherwise large institutions, may also help on a long-term basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I totally agree with that point. So one can also refer to Reserve Bank of India bulletin. So there is an RBI bulletin which is released. It will give you a complete lay of banking and financial services sector and what are the trajectories the sector will move into. So I think that's a report one has to look at it. Second is the report from the Government of India Department of Financial Services. You can go to the DFS website and you can get down and download that report. It will give you a complete trajectory into it. And then, of course, there is an Insurance Regulatory Authority of India, IRDA website, which provides a study on the insurance industry and what are the trends, including the claim settlement ratios. So I think you understand the details at which they publish these reports. So I think one has to look at it to get a clear understanding of how the things are moving across the industry.
So, one
Yeah,
more
one question.
question.
Okay, just ask Varun.
Okay. How can members build a strong professional network?
Yeah, Rohitji, first you can.
Yeah. Again, on the same tone, I think effortless right connectivity, I think never was so easy as it is today. You call it a LinkedIn, I was not a tech savvy initially, I was a late entrant to LinkedIn and all. But I think if, these are so fast, mechanisms, modes, you suddenly connect new, old, all people, you connect on the relevant topic you want. See, if you want to talk on a topic, on a particular very in-depth topic, you will find physically a lot of time, but these kind of platforms, they gives you instantly known and unknown people and relevance. So I think again, technology should be used to its fullest when we want to network. But yes, one old saying, a physical touch, a hello, is like a concreting effect. So I think do use technology exhaustively, create your network. But yes, whenever opportunity exists, cement your relationship, because when you cement your relationship, I think that's travel longer and that lasts longer.
So I think absolutely. So technology is an enabler, but I think we cannot totally be dedicated to technology as far as the networking is concerned, because whether it is networking or whether it is acquiring a customer, the human relationships does not lose its eminence or its focus, right? So I think that becomes very important, whether you're joining a sports club, whether you're joining a book club, or whether you are joining as a part of the ICA forums or any other forums. So I think networking is everywhere to be done. You can definitely be part of some of the core study groups or some of the aspects of the institute as well, so that you can network with the like-minded peoples. But again, as I said, you have to network with not just like-minded people, but also with the people who are not like-minded, because otherwise you will not be able to create something which is new if you constantly interact with only with the like-minded people. So I think networking is very important, but you have to leverage technology, but do not lose the personal touch.
Vineet, you have any questions?
Yeah, so just adding into it. So what are the platforms available for a professional to get regular updates, or maybe, some newsletter, or maybe some groups in which person can join to update himself? Are there
Mangesh?
any groups?
Right. So I think there are various platforms, right? So there is a platform called Deal Curry. So if you register there, you will get to all the information on what the M&As are expected to happen, or some news around it. And there are platform on business lines. So there are platforms on Economic Times. There are others on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a forum where different platforms where you'll be able to get the informations. And as I was speaking, in terms of SS&C Global or other investment managers, you are able to get those updates as well. You can freely register yourself on the McKinsey, right? And then you get a download or the newsletter from them. It's freely disseminated. You can register on all the big fours, and you will be able to get the information. So there is no dearth of information. You will get as much as the information is possible. The only problem here is that what is the relevant information for you? Dissecting that is the most important element.
Very true. I think, again, we have to see that information overload doesn't happen. And then periodically or based on our requirement, we should filter out what one, two, three, few things which you want a regular update, and few other things when you need, you want to go and tap and check or cross check those informations. Idea is the locus of control has to be with us. It should not be with others.
So we have question, what are the regulatory standards around fund accounting, and what need to be done to stay updated? Can you give an insight around that? Basically, fund accounting and regulatory framework.
Right. So as I was mentioning previously as well, right? Fund accounting, right? Or the asset managers or wealth and asset management. is a very lightly regulated industry. And the reason for that was initially that was supposed to be only catering to high net worth individuals or informed investors. So that was the whole idea, that they were supposed to only go for informed investors. And it was also important that you have a lightly regulated entity, because banks are heavily regulated entities. So there has to be some avenues through which the credits or the investments can be channeled. So as far as the regulation is concerned, I would say one can go and have a look at GDPR regulations on the data privacy. One can have a look on the respective regulations of the country regulators. For example, in case of a mutual fund, right? So there are mutual fund regulations. So there are regulated entities and there are unregulated fund entities. So mutual fund regulations, one has to look at through the SEBI website. There are regulations on alternative investment funds, also from the Securities and Exchange Board of India. There are certain regulations, but as I said, one has to visit the SEBI website, and SEBI website will give you the list of all the registered fund as well as all the regulations which are required for the investment industry or the AIF industry in India. There are other regulations. If one were to go into US, then there is something called US SEC, then there is something called Federal Reserve. So those regulations again are different. And then there are EU regulations. One can go and visit the European Union website, and definitely they will be able to get this. But to start with, you start with Securities and Exchange Board of India, at least to get an understanding of what the regulations are for mutual funds and how are they different from the asset management companies.
So, Gaurav, do you have any questions?
Yeah. What are the best practices for managing credit risk and operational risk in banking? And how can chartered accountants contribute to these efforts?
Okay.
Yes, Mangesh?
Yeah. So credit risk and operational risk, right? So from the credit risk perspective, there are different accords which have come into banking, right? Over the course of years, there are different accords. So credit risk, whether it is the Basel Accord 1, 2, 3, we are also going to 4, right? So I think those will definitely steer you in terms of managing the different credit risk. So, and the credit risk is on two counts. One, on your banking book where the lending is going to happen. So how that is going to be monitored. And then the operational risk is basically with respect to the processes not being followed by individuals, or there are some systemic frauds which might come through. So there are various aspects on which the operational risk will have to be managed. And then there are weights attached to operational risk, which will in turn put a load on your capital. So it becomes very important to have those operational risks clearly institutionalized, monitored, and at the same time, there are certain sign-offs one has to be done. So I would put one example around it. So there is something called 3 lines of defenses in a bank, right? So there is a level 1, level 2, and level 3. Now, level 1 defense resides with the process owner or the business owner, who the department which is generating this. And then there is a level 2 defense, which is with the risk and compliance team. They are going to monitor the processes and monitor the control, whether it is on the operational risk side or whether it is on the credit risk side. And then there is a third element on the level 3 defense, which is the internal audit, which we are well versed with, which will continue to be there. So there are the 3 lines of defenses which actually safeguards a banking entity or a financial services entity.
From the perspective of a company, I'll say this on these two topics. See, credit risk, there are multiple tools and tackles by which it can be managed. Customers, there are multiple softwares or multiple models which can be created depending on their past, and other data. There can be loadings based on their experiences. Risk can be adjusted, risk can be transferred. Risk can also be managed. Some transfer can happen, with some cost inbuilt. But if you ask me, operational risk from a company standpoint, operational risk is something which the company has to mitigate. It has to own, understand, and and excel. because otherwise the competitive advantage may go away if we are not managing the operational risk well. So I think these are important. Both credit and operational risks are important, but yes, the way you deal with them, maybe very different, very different.
There's another question. What role do chartered accountants play in evaluating and managing investment strategies within insurance companies?
So a chartered accountant role in case of investment strategy and management, right? So this has to be looked at in two different aspects. One, the insurance company will generate its revenue by either generating the returns of investments, right? And that is predominantly the main avenue of generating the revenue. So from the chartered accountant's perspective, in the Indian context, definitely they will have to understand the investment regulation guidelines of the insurance regulator, which are the permissible investments avenues, which whether it is equity share, whether it is government bonds, whether it is corporate bonds, or whether it is state development loans, they need to understand the universe. And then they understand the market. So very important element is market. They should understand the yield curve, how the functioning of yield curve will impact the short dated securities or the long dated securities. What is your asset and liability management? Because at the end of it, insurance company will liquidate those investments as far as the life insurance company is concerned to pay off the claims and settle those claims which they have underwritten, right? So how that thing has to be managed, the asset and liability management of an insurance company, the investment avenues which are available, and whether those investment avenues comply with the regulatory guidelines, and at the end of it, whether they are remunerative enough to ensure that they generate the return commensurate, one, to give you the return on your capital employed or return on investment, and at the same time, it does not lock in, right? So the duration of your investment, the duration of your liabilities, the matching of them, and generating the returns. These are all the strategies a chartered accountant who is well versed with the investment function of an insurance company, who understands the business model of the insurance company in the first place and understands the investment cycle, will be able to appreciate and provide the strategy and then lay that strategy and operationalize and implement.
So I think, Gaurav, do you have any more questions for our speakers?
No, Vineet, you can take it over from here.
So maybe, we are giving a vote of thanks to Rohit ji and Mangrish ji to give us insight on the complete topic and how our professional colleagues can excel in this particular area, and what are the platforms or maybe portals are available to get the insight and to be updated on this. So with this, thanks to you, both of you, for giving us your time, a precious time out of your busy schedule, and giving the insight. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vineet. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, ICAI. And I think thanks to all the attendees. I think knowledge is never one way. I think when we attend like this, we listen to these questions, a lot of triggers happens in our mind, and that becomes again question marks which we go back and solve. So I think thanks ICAI for this, and thanks to Mangrish, a good co-speaker.
Yeah. So I think thanks a lot. Of course, my alma mater ICAI. I always love to speak at ICAI at any forums. And thanks to Vineet, Gaurav, and Rohit ji, you have been a very good co-speaker, helping me around and setting the context and steering this entire program. And all the more importantly, I will thank the participants for raising the questions. Of course, and that makes a chartered accountant as a profession to raise questions, and that's the role of a chartered accountant. I think that is a good thing. We continue to do so as you pan out into your respective careers. All the best for joining here, and thank you very much for inviting me onto this.
No, thanks for your time and effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank you, Rohit ji. Thank you, Mangrish ji. Thank you, Gaurav ji. And thank you, Vineet ji. we are concluding this session.
Thanks, Lakshit.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lakshit.
Thank you.